We have the ANC in Gauteng saying it doesn't agree with the recommendation of its Integrity Commission that the two former MECs should have their membership revoked. They're citing, as you've just seen in that interview, the wealth of experience that they have. Is that good enough?
No, it can't be good enough that because you've served, you cannot be found to have been at fault. Look at Nhlanhlanyena's situation. I'm sure he had a wealth of experience too, and he chose to stand down. You look at the scenario of Kudani Mahlangu standing down, certainly under pressure, not voluntarily, from the circumstances of the Life Esidimeni matter. So we've got enough evidence in front of us to make a decisive ruling on, look, it's time to move on.
What's also extraordinary is that the spokesperson is saying that the debate around Life Esidimeni deaths is one for another day. Yet, the MECs were very successful in cost saving. And that's a real slap in the face to the families of the victims, isn't it?
The simple question is, whose interest are we acting in? The public. We've got to act in the public interest first. Neither the organizational interest nor the job that you held, only you hold the job for the public. It's certainly a slap in the face of the public and the victims of allegations that have run 8 years in relation to the Department of Health, of the victims of losses of lives in the Life Esidimeni scandal. I think we should be looking at the public interest first in these matters. It is a slap in the face for the public interest.
What does this then say, whether it be the ANC, as we've just heard, or any other organization that tends to default to parlaying blame and not wanting to accept the recommendations often of a bona fide unit like the Integrity Commission, for instance? Is it simply paying lip service then to governance?
I'm really worried about this in the whole political landscape, lip service to governance. There's a strong dispensation around the language of consequence management. You'll find it very serious rhetoric in the public sector right now. You'll find accountability being strong rhetoric. I think what we're really missing is the impact of not holding people accountable, more importantly, not teaching people to be self-accountable. When you resign, as you see in different jurisdictions like Sweden, for example, people are inclined to stand back and say, in the public interest, I am accused of sexual misconduct. I need to stand down in the public interest. I think we need to move towards a culture that's more about the public interest and not about whether I'm guilty or not guilty. You're an office bearer. You were elected with a clean slate. The day that becomes tainted is the day you should stand down.
So why are political parties, and again not signalling or making specific reference to the ANC, but others as well, let's be perfectly clear about that, why do they shy away from accountability? What prevents them from embracing the pure notion of governance as you've just outlined?
I frankly think it's an internal ethos, a weak value system within certain political parties.
Why? Why would there be a weak value system?
The weak value system is based on a history of cronyism. Loyalty, past loyalties to each other overcomes values of fairness, accountability, transparency, the public interest as a value, as a purpose for why we're in public service.
So how do organizations recalibrate that?
We recalibrate it by going back to the fundamentals of good corporate governance. And one of those fundamentals is accountability of the self. And that accountability of the self can only be encouraged by inculcating a value system and a culture within the organization that says, when conduct irregular Y exists, we take action Z. We have a sanctions policy. That sanctions policy is, we can't waver from it. We will act regardless of whether we found you guilty or not guilty yet. We will conduct an expeditious inquiry. We will investigate. We will quickly, within a couple of weeks, resolve that inquiry by securing its recommendations. We will take action against you. We will implement consequence management. And we will see the back of you in the public interest.
Mitigating against that, I imagine, this cavalier attitude and this one of flouting the rules could simply be so entrenched that we're not going to get out of this.
I believe it's entrenched. You see it in the US with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party recently in the Judge Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, the matter was a serious matter in the public interest, the abuse allegations, sexual misconduct allegations. Should a person be sitting in a high-profile public office with that cloud hanging over him for the next 30 years? Whose interest are we representing, the person or the public. And I'm sorry to say that in court, the ruling is made based on the public interest. Sometimes the facts slant towards, is it in the public interest that this person should continue in this position or not? That's a very big part of a judge's ruling, a presiding officer's ruling, the public interest.
So what pressure then can be brought to bear if we're going to change that?
Absolutely. The public should bring the pressure to bear. The public should show more activism.
I mean, you have a vocal civil society. You have a robust and interrogative media. What more pressure can be brought?
We don't have the man in the street educated about his right to make more noise. If you look at what happens in some other jurisdictions, you'll find immediately you'll have strong demonstrations outside offices of public officials showing activism for their departure from office.
Professor,
because
don't
of
we
the
do that all the
interest.
time? I mean,
No,
every second day there's a protest, there's the handing over of a memorandum. Are you suggesting that we're not doing enough of it?
Not that powerfully in this country. In this country we have some NGO-type organizations that represent certain interests. Those interests...
Very successfully sometimes.
Very successfully sometimes, I'm glad you say that. But those interests aren't always aligned to those of the general public. The general public has other loyalties. And I think the general public needs to be more active against the parties they voted into power. We were talking about political parties. The general public should be more active. In fact, the general public stands up and protects their party, no matter what their party does. That's very different from organized NGO activism.
This Integrity Commission, back to the ANC, is this a waste of time? If you have organizations within the party like the ANC in Gauteng saying, well, we'll be selective, we'll do that, but we're not going to do that.
One of the fundamental issues with consequence management is consistency. You rightly point out, you can't do it sometimes and not other times. Because guess what wins? The other times that you don't do it is what wins and develops a new culture of tolerance.
Peter Goss, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Corporate governance consultant, thank you very much indeed.